Our students are the future. How we advance innovation and impact and approach equity in their classrooms will determine how we thrive as a world community. The status quo just won't cut it. That's why we're here to break the grade. Hello, breakers and difference makers. I'm Josh Chernikoff, host of How I Broke That. I'm a two-time entrepreneur in the education space, and I've successfully exited both of those companies. I've experienced my fair share of breaks in my life, and I'm here to bring my signature approach to my new show, Breaking the Grade. I'm embarking on this special journey alongside my good friend and mentor, John Gamba, Director of Innovative Programs and Entrepreneur in Residence at Penn GSE. In our podcast, you'll hear from emerging business owners in the education space who are working to transform education as we know it. Tune in as we hear about industry trends, unique principles and practices, and the attempts that have and haven't worked for our grade-breaking guests. So fellow entrepreneurs and educators, what do you think? Are you ready to take a hammer to the education space and break the grade? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Breaking the Grade. I want to tell you about my new best friend who I met through my other best friend and the co-host of Breaking the Grade, John Gamba. Her name is Jolene Levine. Jolene and I have known each other, for about 6 months, but it feels like we've known each other for 6 years. That is the type of energy and vulnerability and clarity Jolene, my new best friend, brings. This episode of Breaking the Grade starts with a plastic chair in Australia. Yes, a plastic chair in Australia, and ends with a mission of reshaping schools through furniture in North America. So Jolene didn't just build a company. She actually got fired from that company. And Jolene, she didn't just sell furniture. She has turned it into a tool to transform learning for kids of all shapes and all sizes. She has sat on floors with superintendents and architects explaining exactly why space matters as much as the curriculum. And if you've ever felt invincible or crushed by a no, this might be the reset you have been looking for. In a tough market, Jolene, she doesn't chase. She finds the people who already care and doubles down. Let's get into it with my new best friend, Jolene Levine. Welcome to Breaking the Grade. Welcome to a live edition of Breaking the Grade. Jolene Levine, who is a new friend of mine that I've known since my first ERDI, and this happens to be my second.
So we've been long friends.
Super long friends, like total of 6 months, but it feels like many years. We become fast friends. Thank you for joining Breaking the Grade.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here because I get to watch Breaking the Grade on LinkedIn. So happy to be a guest.
Yeah, and thank you yesterday for being my official photographer.
It's a pleasure.
While I did my LinkedIn workshop talk, that was really helpful. Today's show is about you. And when we do these conference interviews, we spend the first 10 or 15 minutes kind of talking about your journey. And then we're going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes after that talking about furniture.
Love it.
Which is such an interesting topic.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So first, take us back to wherever you want. I would imagine we're going to Australia. Yeah. And get us started on your journey.
Awesome. So a really crazy journey. And if you had asked me 20 years ago if I'd be in educational furniture, I wouldn't have expected that. But my husband and I, about 18 years ago, when I was 9 months pregnant, decided, as you do, that we were going to start our own business. And we had no money at all to do that. And he's an industrial designer, and he had worked at some furniture companies, and he's handy. And so we sort of started this installation company, which was kind of weird, furniture installation. And one day, about 18 years ago, we were delivering blue plastic chairs into a school in Sydney. It was a pretty progressive, innovative private school, in Sydney, Australia. And we went to deliver these chairs, which were not cheap chairs. And the principal at the time turned around to us and said, this is not the furniture that we need for the way that we're teaching and for the future of education. And we really didn't have any idea about that. I think my first child was probably about 3 months old at that point in time. And we were like, what are you talking about? So he started to talk about the fact that, educational outcomes were changing, Josh, that it wasn't more, the mark you got on the test, it was the skills, right? And at that point in time, it was the 4 C's that everybody was talking about: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. And he said, kids need to master these skills in school, and the environment is part of that toolkit to master the skills. So if you can't set up a collaborative learning environment, collaboration won't happen. And we were really intrigued by this. And so we were like, well, what sort of furniture are you looking for? And he wanted things that were softer and more inviting, but fit for purpose for kids. And we started to design bespoke furniture for him and for that school. And we started to put these learning environments in there, and we started to see the impact that it was having on kids. And we just became addicted, like absolutely addicted in trying to design everything that hadn't been designed yet. And we knew needed to go into schools in order to facilitate kids, future of learning.
It's interesting. That particular, was he a principal?
Yeah, he was.
That particular principal kind of reminds me of people who listen to the show know I do a lot of sports metaphors, but the first person who was like, we need to start looking at analytics in baseball.
Yep.
Who started looking at everything differently and said, for us to really get the outcomes, we even need to focus on this, the furniture that the kids, sit in and essentially live in 5 days a week from 8 to 3 every single day.
Well, he knew that environment mattered, and I think as humans, when you walk into a restaurant that's got a good, vibe to it, you feel different inside that space. And so that's kind of where we've lived, in that level of impact, wanting to create something where kids felt good about learning and the environment facilitated their little bodies too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you start the company, you've got kind of your North Star and this principal who's guiding you along.
Yep.
And I'm sure the company grew. You had no problems. You're making a shit ton of money.
It was great.
Right?
It was
That's
so
how
easy.
it goes,
Yeah,
right?
it was a really easy thing, of course.
Right.
So we grew the company a little bit in Australia for 6 years. And then we were actually contacted by a lady, Diana Wilmont, who was the outgoing president of the Californian Educational Research Association. This was like in 2016. And she said, I have a conference in Anaheim every year, and I've never seen anything in America like what you guys are doing. She found us in Australia. And she said, would you come and bring your furniture to this conference and show people the future of education? So being a little Australian, that was kind of exciting. And we did. We made furniture for the conference. And there we met some people from Steelcase. And they were like, if you ever decided to come to the US, I think we'd really be behind selling your furniture. So that's all I need to hear as an entrepreneur. 6 months later, 4 children visas, we came to Dallas to set up our business. And then it's been a crazy ride, Josh, because the first year we were here, we literally grew exponentially, too much, too quick. And being a foreign business, we then needed to go out and get investors for our company, which we did. And 2 years ago, my husband and I got fired from our company that we founded, which was quite a ride.
Well, let's sort those things out. Okay, let's start with the one that sounds really exciting, which is we grew too much, too fast, which I think a lot of people in our audience would say that sounds like an amazing problem to have, but as my former COO would say, still a problem. Yeah. So what does it mean to grow too much, too fast?
We also were making furniture, so shipping furniture and doing all of that. So what happened was we came in 2017. We didn't really have even a warehouse or our manufacturing properly set up, and went to a trade show. And at that trade show, literally wrote $10 million worth of business in the first 3 months. And it wasn't fun because I think, Josh, you would appreciate this. We were very serious about what we did. We wanted people to have a good experience with something. You know, when you're introducing something that's new and different, I also felt really responsible, like that if this is their first step at doing something innovative and we've failed or made it a negative experience, are they going to stop, you know, wanting to move forward in that direction? So I felt all of this like really immense responsibility. And in educational furniture, it's very seasonal. So you sell for 3 months, you collect purchase orders for 3 months, you manufacture, and then you ship predominantly before school goes back. So if you miss your shipment dates and kids don't have furniture to sit on in the first day of school, that's a bit of a problem. So we faced all of those struggles, you know, in the first couple of years. And we did make, you know, we got it all intact and all of that, but it was hard. It was hard to grow like that.
And had you not experienced that pressure, that seasonality in Australia?
A little bit different. Not it's very different. I mean, we have a different school year. Firstly, we go by calendar years, and we have more breaks throughout the year. So there's not like a 3-month almost break at the end of the year. So we had experienced a little bit, but that first year, Josh, of being in America, our business here was double the size of our business in Australia in 3 months. I don't think I realized how exponential, you know, it could actually be. And it was, which was great. But yeah.
Was there ever a moment?
What was it
Well,
like
what was it like
in your house?
in your house?
At that time,
Yeah.
it's pretty chaotic. You know, I've got 4 kids. You know, there were many times during that first year that I would honestly drive to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, like sick. Honestly, it's like, how am I going to get this done? But I don't know. I always have had such a belief in what we do and the work that we're doing and the impact that we're making that I think I've always known we were going to get through it.
Is getting through it fired?
Yeah.
Getting
well,
fired?
apparently.
And that's one way to get through it.
Right.
Okay.
So I think, you know, the typical founder entrepreneur story, maybe in, you know, the wrong partnerships. So I've learned a lot about that. But something that happened when we got fired 2 years ago was the mission never left me. So even though I felt like I'd lost my first child in the company, you know, that we had started, which actually the name of it is my husband's name backwards, Northern Ivel. I think the loss for me, the greater loss, was less about the company and more about how am I going to continue to do this work. And so I had to find that. I had to find how to continue to do the work.
And you certainly have figured out how to continue to do the work. And we'll talk about that. I want to transition a little bit sooner than I would. We got about 5 minutes left and we can talk about your journey. People should go check you out on LinkedIn, follow you. You got a podcast. You're doing badass stuff. A lot of people who listen to this show know, and we are recording this on July, I don't know what the date.
It's the 15th, July 15th. Yeah.
Fine. I've lost track of time. It's been a pretty crazy 60 days. People who listen to this show know that I lost my father about a month ago, and that my family basically moved back to DC 3 weeks ago. So a lot of change, a lot of adjusting. And I'll tell you one thing, aside from my father, which has been the biggest adjustment that I've ever had in my life, but I tend to make jokes to get myself comfortable with things. Since we moved, we've had to buy all new furniture because all of our old furniture, which is nice stuff, is in our house on Capitol Hill. And I have been amazed at the price of furniture in the United States. Not only the price of furniture, but also the fact that everything we order is back ordered.
Yep.
They charge us $200, $300 for shipping, and then it shows up. Or it really, none of it has. It's pushed by a week and pushed by another week. So explain to my audience kind of why furniture is expensive. And then we're going to transition and we're really going to talk about the value of furniture?
I love that. So our company at Northern Ivel, we were probably one of the most expensive educational furniture companies. And actually, Josh, it wasn't that we necessarily wanted to be that way, but so much of what we did was kind of like bespoke and custom as well. So the way that you manufacture, has a real impact on cost and economies of scale. But for me, it was the value proposition was different, right? So I never wanted to set out to be the cheapest, but what we did promise was everything that we designed was research informed. It was a very different kind of sale. We weren't selling widgets into schools. When you're going in and you're changing a learning environment, you're changing, it's going to impact how teacher practice happens and how the learners respond in that space. And so part of what we did with, the furniture was the consultation. So I would personally go in there and literally help teachers understand how to now use a different environment as part of their tool in, how they were going to teach these kids. So I think the value proposition was different.
Mm-hmm. As you sit here and talk to me, though, I can hear the 153 people who have been through the Ed Sales Elevation experience talking about how they believe in what they do. They believe in their value proposition. They would sit down with the teachers to go through the platform or whatever they've created. So in that sense, how did you get comfortable with the fact that you weren't the cheapest option?
Well, I think maybe said it yesterday as well in your session that you gave, is I didn't necessarily set out to go and get every school in the US, right? And so there were certain schools that were the right customers for us. And there are certain places that I've been been there and I've realized this probably isn't a Northern Ivel customer. Generally, whenever I express that out loud, they wanted to work out how they could be, that kind of a customer. But I tried to really focus on the schools and districts that were our customers and that we actually could get into like a deeper process with, that I wasn't just the furniture lady coming in, but they understood that we were a really important part of that learning ecosystem.
Yeah. In my tutoring company, we found the right families we could help, the families we knew we could help. In my aftercare company, we found the schools that valued us and we knew we could help. One of the things that I talk about in the Ed Sales Elevation experience is this idea of window washing. And I don't even think in our many conversations and glasses of wine and things like that we've discussed this, but I love this idea of, imagine that you are a window washer. That's what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And you're in a city. We're in Baltimore. So you're in Baltimore and you look at two buildings. One of them has clean windows. One of them has dirty windows. And in my opinion, since you are a window washer, you should go and want to work with the people who have clean windows.
Yep.
Because they value what you do. They value the clean window, the smell, the feel for them. So in your business of building bespoke and quality furniture, was it important for you to find people who valued what you did?
Of course, because otherwise we were just expensive furniture, right? And so it definitely alignment on values and people that understood the importance of the learning environment, which has been a big part of my mission in the last couple of years. Less about any one company and more about just raising the awareness around the impact of environment and space, hopefully being an advocate for that, and an advocate for kids to get environments that are inclusive, that are cognitively right for them, that are, help their bodies physically grow inside, these school classrooms that they're in for like 80%. And that's the other crazy thing, Josh, the amount of time kids spend inside in America in the school system, right? So I mentioned I had 4 kids. My son was in middle school. I don't think he saw the outside Like, I don't think there were windows. I don't think, he went outside. Australia, we're very different. We very much do a lot of things outside. So I felt, if they're going to be inside for this long, we've got to make that environment a healthy environment for these kids to learn in.
So we agree on theory that we want to find people to sell to who value, not necessarily trying to convince, in my case, a school that doesn't have an enrichment program that they need one.
Yep.
In your case, that somebody who doesn't value good furniture, that they need good furniture, and that can be related to the other 153 people who have, been a member of the Edsels Elevation Experience and are listening to this. So we agree on the theory. How do you then find those people?
That's a good question. So I think sometimes those people find you, which is always lucky, right? It's lucky when the customer comes and finds you. In our space, it's actually being able to go out into places like this, go to ERDI, go to other conferences where there are people who are seeking these things. And that's kind of how it happens. But the other big thing is architects and designers, right? So they hold a lot of power in designing schools, in helping guide schools in a visioning process to understand what's going on. And so I try and find those people, educate them in why, the value, of why it's important. And then I try and, change from up there, change people from up there, but all based on knowledge and understanding, taking it away from it's just furniture.
Right. And you when we were talking at one point, you talked about who to sell to, and you mentioned in your case who not to sell to.
Yep.
And can you talk us through that? Because it's really important. One of the first things we do is think about the exact person to sell to. It's not the education industry. It's not somebody in a school.
Yep.
It's what's the title, what do they do, and what's their 3 a.m. And so you talked about somebody who it's not their 3 a.m. Their 3 a.m. is how do I cut costs?
Yeah.
So how do you, talk about the who not to sell to and the who to sell to in your case?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I was the only salesperson at Northern Ivel, and I would always say that even though I had a furniture company for 18 years, I don't think I sold a piece of furniture a day in my life. I've felt it kind of like my mission is to actually find those people and educate them differently. But more than that, Josh, it's understanding their pain points and their motivations, right? So in educational furniture, you could be selling to an architect, you could be selling to a superintendent, you could be selling, we mentioned, like a procurement person who really just wants to tick the boxes on standardized stuff and then put it aside and know that they've got it in budget, right? And sometimes it's hard to even engage them in a proper conversation about why it's important. So I've tried in the last many years of being an entrepreneur and being in this is really developing empathy. And I think that that's helped, right? Understanding, well, what am I coming in here to solve for them? And why is it so important that we solve it? And how do we link this to outcomes that we know are important for kids? And generally, when we would come in, we're completely flipping and changing an environment. And that is something that's very nerve-wracking for a leader to do, because if they get it wrong, how do we know? And so research and evidence has always been my fallback when trying to get people in, because this is a massive change process.
Last question here. Doesn't seem like people really have the answer to this question, and we're at an institute with some of the smartest people in the education industry. What do you do today when you're selling high-end furniture for a very good reason, when people are losing their jobs, when $6 billion at this moment is being withheld by the administration? So how do you approach people, and you don't want to convince them. You want them to understand the value of doing this. But this is a really tough time to sell anything, especially what you're doing. I'm going to sound like the cool kids, on social media, but I love that for you.
Thank
And I love that for our audience, because I'm sitting here and I really feel your passion. I understand where you're coming from. I believe in what you're saying. And we're going to go to meeting number 2 if you're coming into my office. I'm not saying I'm buying that, but you've piqued my interest, and it's coming from a place of passion and a place of purpose. And as one of my mentors said, it all has the benefit of being true.
Yep.
So that's great. So I think there's a lot for everybody to learn from your story, which is the building of the business with your husband, the growing too fast, the getting fired, the getting up off the mat, and sticking with it, and being super, super cool. Yeah. You're an important part of the ecosystem, and I'm learning more and more about why you're important. And so important to me, important to this community, important to ERDI. So thank you.
Thanks for listening.